say that I'd love to hear your feedback and provide any additional information once we wrap up. So let's get started. I wanted to give you a little overview, or I should say a quick overview of my background before we get going. I previously owned a management company for about 13 years and went through a lot of the same struggles that you probably are experiencing, and gained a lot of insight into the topic that we're going to cover today. I'm really excited to be heading up our new customer success department here at Talks. And my goal is to provide you the tools and assistance you need to really help you grow your business. I really enjoy the complexity of the industry and finding new ways to implement efficiencies to help you guys save time. So what we'll be covering today includes, understanding the reasons that you should standardize in your organization. And then we're going to cover the key areas that are probably the most efficient to standardize, and then how to develop and implement the processes so that you're going to see that result pretty quickly. So when you go to McDonald's, which I'm sure we all have, how is it that anytime you eat in a McDonald's, you never question that a Big Mac will taste exactly like the last time you remember? Well, aren't we needy for that expectation? But seriously, can you imagine if the burgers were different every time you visited a McDonald's? The question is, would you go back? So how is it that McDonald's can produce such consistent results across every location, every employee, no matter what time of day or what staff they have? So that's what we're going to go through today of how to equate that into your management and get the same kinds of results. So how does McDonald's do it? Well, they do it by standardizing each step in the preparation, also on the training, so that their people really understand what the process is, and then they continually monitor the results. So they literally have a formula for success. So you may be wondering, well, what does this have to do with managing my communities? So as a business leader, ensuring that your clients get the same level of service, no matter who they interact with in your organization, is essential, to your ongoing success. So what if I told you you can get these same results by standardizing your management services? So let's dive a little deeper into that. So it's no secret that companies like Amazon and Google and Apple, they're really changing the customer experience. And at the core, our consumers are expecting much more from their service providers. And of course, the association management industry is not immune to this. So the levels of service expectations are growing exponentially, and truthfully making it more difficult for us to keep up with the instant response that so many board members and homeowners have come to expect. So the thing that we need to ask ourselves is, do you have a business strategy? So how many of you, and just think internally, have written processes for standards and procedures throughout your whole organization? So if you don't, it's a lot like being at an I can't even talk today, an orchestra, and listening when everyone's playing a different piece of music. So it's going to be chaotic. So to kind of drive this point home, I thought of a couple of examples. So this will be just a quick overview to make you laugh. So scenario one, and I'd love to see how many people, agree that this does sound familiar and it's happened to you more than once. So you and your team are prepped and ready for your annual meeting. And as you're about to walk out the door, you realize, wait, did we get the last year's annual meeting minutes? and everyone looks at each other. So someone says, anyone remember who the secretary was? Someone else responds, well, aren't they supposed to send a copy to the manager after the meeting? And everyone looks at each other thinking, where did we save last year's minutes? Wait, who was the manager last year? And panic sets in. All right, here we go again. What about this one? So your manager is attending a board meeting and he sits down, and next thing you know, the president of the board says, hey, why does Joe Brown still have a late fee on his account when we approved it to be waived 3 months ago? Of course, all eyes are looking at you while you fumble, looking at the report, trying to, come up with a good excuse. And then, of course, secretly thinking about whoever was supposed to waive the charge. You're thinking, wait, did I send that to them? I'm gonna have to go back through all my emails to see if I can find it. And of course, panic sets in. So when situations like this occur, our level of trust and accountability to our boards is really deteriorated. So things like this that can be easily, remedied by having some processes will go a long way in creating that trust with your boards. So let's look at the benefits of implementing standardization. So first thing that we're going to be able to see is that it is going to streamline our internal operations. When we've got uniformity across our employees and the way we do things, it's going to make a big difference in our outputs. Additionally, we're going to be able to improve accuracy and efficiency. So not only is it going to save, time and money and essentially employee accountability. Thirdly, time savings is huge because, of course, overhead is probably the highest on your employees. So finding ways for them to be efficient is so critical today. And then, of course, ensuring consistent results. That's going to be tied right back to the McDonald's idea of the same thing, the same time, no matter who they're dealing with in your organization. And then, of course, reduce training time and costs to bring a new employee in. You've already got the policies in place, so it's going to be easier to get them integrated into, the day-to-day part of doing their job. And then we'll look at kind of what the core things that you're going to gain out of having these standards and processes. One is going to be to protect workers. So, your employees, they don't want to have to make internal decisions, on top of all the other things they have to remember. So they're going to have more confidence when they know exactly what the process is or the procedure, so they can say that, and have that ingrained into everything that they're doing on a daily basis. Additionally, you're going to protect your customers because your homeowners, your board members, your vendors, they are all, relying on you to provide a dependable service, to have it the same time after time. And then lastly, driving value. Processes are crucial to give you a competitive edge. So next, let's take a look at the what. And this would be the areas that we're going to identify and go through that are really going to, drive home the value here. So if you find yourself saying, wow, I really do need to look at how we can standardize if I want to grow my business, then let's dive into some key areas that with standardization, it will transform your ability to scale while increasing your client retention. Because we all know it's much more costly to lose a client or to onboard a new client than it is just to retain the ones that we have. So we're going to look at a couple of areas and kind of go through those one by one. So the first one we're going to cover is standardized formatting. in my years in management, I like to learn things the hard way, and I did. So I recall that one of the biggest time savers that we implemented was standardizing our GL format, especially as you're taking on, more and more communities. This is going to be more crucial. So when you are an accounting person and you go to, make a postage entry, it is always GL 5420. So no matter what community you manage, no matter, what you're doing, that's the code. Because that way, your team's not spending time going through and digging through a GL listing, trying to determine where the code is so they can do an AP item. Secondly, this one is probably closest to my heart because it's so worth investing the time in as a company owner. The pain you go through when any letter goes out incorrectly or there's errors. I used to get so frustrated in my business, that I finally got to the point where I'd had it and I put in place a rule that any mass mailing to owners had to pass through my hands for approval. Did I want to go through every letter? No. But what it did make me realize is that there were hundreds of different formats for the same types of letters. And it made no sense because then it took me a lot longer to identify and find the information that I knew that I needed to check, dates, addresses, things of that nature. So, how is it possible an educated manager can incorrectly enter the annual meeting date? That part I don't know, but I do know that I was out the money to resend the notice, and not to mention, the embarrassment to my boards and the confusion to the homeowners. But what I realized was that these mistakes were happening because we were using too many different versions of the same notice. And I know some of you are thinking, but that's, the one the board wants to use. Well, you need to let them know that things are changing. No, seriously, boards don't know what they don't know. So educating and explaining that adopting a standard format for all your mailings will ensure accuracy and timeliness of the mailings. So plus all the pertinent information is in the same place in the letter. And you can standardize that in your software. So if they're in Tops Pro or Tops One, you can have that format and use it and copy it across all your communities. Seems way too easy, doesn't it? All right, next we're going to cover standardizing data entry. Okay, so for those of you who are Tops Pro clients, I can bet you that you have at least one example related to the monster that your staff has created in your system from not adhering to a standard way of doing data entry. I'd love to get a show of hands, even though I can't, on how many have duplicate vendors because the data entry was different, or two streets with the same name. And these are caused by incorrect abbreviations, causing multiple records. So let me ask you, how much confusion and error did these types of challenges cause you? So do you wish you could go back and have this knowledge when you started? Well, you can't, but it's better to start doing it correctly and uniformly now moving forward. And lastly, on standardizing, one of the things that I think is so crucial is that your organization represent itself consistently. Do not let your employees pick their own email signatures, determine what it's going to say, have 10 different kinds of font with little dancing things on it. As a professional management company, having those things be consistent across any correspondence that goes out electronically is so crucial. So, adopt an email signature format and have everyone use it. And then, as a side note, one of the benefits that I found with that is using the email signature replies to create multiple ones that your employees can hit a drop down for that contain, commonly sent information, links to forms, links to websites, different things that you're constantly having to type out. To be more efficient and create those standards, take a few minutes to think about those things and create an email reply signature that has all of that in there. Just another time savings. Okay, next we're going to talk about standardizing naming conventions. This one is so critical, and I've been guilty of not doing it even to date, but when you're managing that many associations and that many documents and locating these things easily and quickly and across all of your employees, and knowing exactly where to find things, this is probably one of the biggest time savers that you'll learn today. There's always a free-for-all mentality prevalent when it comes to naming electronic files and folders. And the problem, really stems from the fact that there are no official standards typically in place or policies with most organizations. Most likely management hasn't taken an initiative to establish a folder and file naming convention that staff members can follow. So this is really critical, and it's something that I implemented many years back so that every community on our share drive had a standard list of folders. You might have to one-off add one in for a specific community, but if somebody's out sick or they're on vacation, you know exactly where to locate something. And then on the naming convention, come up with a system and teach it to everyone, whether it's the community code is the first 3 letters, and then the document name, and then the date, so that you don't run the risk of having 3 or 4 of the same document that are older versions and someone's accidentally grabbing one of those. I'm sure we've all had it happen with an architectural request form or whatever it is. Make sure they're saving the older ones into a file folder and maintaining an up-to-date list of everything with the same naming conventions. How you organize these will be up to you, but it's going to have a big impact on your ability and your team's ability to find those files later. All right, we're going to move on to checklists. Okay, so we all know the benefits of using a checklist. So remember these words. Checklists will save your job, save your clients, and are so essential to scaling your company over the years. HRA management is equivalent to trying to ride a bike while baking a cake. There's so many variables at any given time that you would really need to be Einstein to keep track of everything you need to remember. So that's why, having a checklist is so important and critical for things like new community transitions, annual meetings, monthly collections, and so much more. And checklists prevent things from falling through the cracks. Some of the most common ones that I used were new community onboarding. And a lot of people don't think about this one, but even an outgoing community checklist can be beneficial. So that you make sure and you document everything that you're transitioning, and you don't have a company coming back later saying, well, they never provided that. Nope, here's my checklist. I have it checked off. And this one's, a real time saver too. When you take on a new community, have a monthly financial checklist that manager fills out. What reports you're including, who they go to, if there's any special terms. And it's easy if, you have an accounting transition. That consistency in the results that they're producing. Really keeping everybody on the same page. And lastly, collection checklist. That way you know, hey, am I supposed to do letters on this date? What's the next step? Have I done my attorney, actions? Have I updated my payment plans? And then if somebody's wanting to get information on that, they can essentially, you want a system that's going to track all that, but internally having those checklists for that person so that they don't let anything fall through the cracks. And then, of course, annual meeting checklist. So how many of you have an annual meeting checklist? Again, it's so critical to have your sign-in sheet. But then people overlook things like, oh, I forgot to bring pens. Or, I forgot to bring some of these, basic, easy things like your annual meeting minutes, or, a copy of the governing documents in case we get a question, or, the voting tab ballots, or anything like that. Just having the checklist is just that extra layer of security to make sure that you look professional and that you have everything you need when you go into a meeting. Coding structures, this, as you grow, I learned was so critical. And I'll give you a background into it. I was a TOPS Pro user for 11 years. And after taking on so many communities and being so overwhelmed, I realized that some of our issues were probably due to the fact that, the codes that we had set up, whether it was CCR codes, whether it was collection step codes, were all different. So when I took a lot of time to go back through and make them all uniform, the result was, astonishing on how much time and how much more effective we were. So really think out like what your code aliases are and that naming structure. And also really detailing the descriptions so that, I like to think of it like, make it where a first grader can understand it. That way you never have to worry that it's going to be misconstrued or someone's going to do something because they thought it was supposed to be done this way. So in using consistent coding structures, like I mentioned, collections, so critical. CCR codes, whether you have the managers do inspections or whether you've got a compliance inspector, if they're using some kind of abbreviated code, make sure landscaping is always landscaping, no matter what community they're inspecting. And it's just going to go a long way in preventing, errors and miscommunication. Work order codes, essentially the same as CCR codes, just that naming convention is going to go a long way in being productive. All right, next we're going to talk about forms. So there's nothing more time consuming than wading through your emails, trying to gather needed information to do a task. You're not only wasting your time looking for information, but more than not, you realize you don't have enough information and end up going back and forth through, the email minutia, trying to get the small amount of information to do your job. And of course, then you've got that risk of dropping the ball on something. So the main thing is when you're dealing with a task that can be so much more efficient if you just had structured information. An example would be, a request for a fee waiver. And okay, well, how much is going to be waived? What code is it going to be waived to? Who approved it? These types of, consistent things are where forms and e-forms are essential. So by using these standardized forms, you're not only going to prevent mistakes and make your life a whole lot easier, but ones that we use that were just critical in time savings. This one probably a lot of people don't think about, but budget submission form was such a problem for us on getting the information. I remember our accounting staff grumbling year after year about getting this needed information for managers on, related to their budgets, so that they could order their coupons or statements for a community. And more often than not, we were pressed for time to meet deadlines, and inevitably there was always chaos and at least one community that went out with a letter or statement amount that was incorrect. So to prevent these types of challenges, I developed a budget submission form that was required by the managers to be submitted when they turned in their budget, and it captured all the needed information that was condensed on the first page. Did they have a dues increase? Did they have a change in their reserve contribution? And things of that nature. So having that process was invaluable. You can even make this an electronic form and include other departments that need the information. Like everyone forgets to tell the resale department if there's an increase in dues, or if there is some kind of suit against the association. So keeping everybody in the loop, really prevents mistakes or lawsuits or anything from happening where you're, putting, yourself in jeopardy to losing clients. AP approval threshold. I loved this one so that my boards didn't have to approve every AP item that came across my desk. We put a threshold policy together. If it's within budget, I can spend up to this much, don't need your approval. If it's over this amount, we'll get one of the board's approval. If it's outside of the budget, you can set different parameters, but you see where I'm going with that. Payment plan requests. Instead of, the hectic email of, hey, I want a payment plan. Okay, yeah, sure, we set it up. And then we realize, wait a minute, they didn't pay, or they didn't pay the next dues. And then they call and say, how come I got sent to the attorney? I'm on a payment plan. So to prevent all this, confusion, having a payment plan request form that really holds the owner to the specifications that they're agreeing to. Things like, always keeping up to date on future payments, what their down payment is, how much they're going to make per month, what's going to happen if they don't make a payment, so that everyone is on the same page and everyone, can be more productive. And then my favorite, the add waive charge request. We all know that probably burdens a lot of our staff. So having like an e-form or a form that you can send someone that sets the criteria for, hey, please waive the $25 late charge that I got this year. My dog ate the check, whatever it is. And have the board set some parameters like, okay, well, you don't need our permission. You can waive one late fee per year or every other year, as long as they're not this, far behind. Whatever those parameters are, get your board to agree upon them, and then create that process so that you can just push that through in a standard format to your accounting. And then the accounting is going to have that to easily make that adjustment, so that when you're at that meeting, the board member's not looking at you like, why has it been 3 months and I still see this hasn't been waived? And that's because we don't want to burden our accounting staff with having to dig through emails and try to decipher, what they're supposed to waive. Okay, a couple of additional areas that I think are, pretty important to implement, a standard operating procedure process. One is additional billings for addendum charges. So if you allow your, managers 2-hour meeting cap, but if it goes over that, you pay them a certain amount, have a form they can fill out to submit that to you. It's going to, not only make it more efficient, but also encourage them to actually charge those things. Because I don't think that you should ever put something in your contract that you don't charge for on a regular basis. It's just going to undermine your ability to do it moving forward. Secondly is like a board package checklist for your communities. You know, what's supposed to be included, what is the order, but don't always let your boards, you know, dictate how things are supposed to be. A lot of times they just need explanation of why you have to do things in a certain order, and they're, you know, they can be pretty reasonable, but it's just convincing them as to why it's important. And then lastly, you know, additional charges for meeting attendance for other employees. If you've got, you know, administrative people who attend annual meetings or things like that, just having that form available for them. All right, now we're going to transition into the how. And I love this quote that if you find yourself reacting, then you really aren't investing enough time in planning. And that's, you know, so true, but it's probably the hardest thing for most of us to do because we're already so overwhelmed that the thought of taking 2 steps back and spending more time to get organized or to implement, you know, a new process or system, it seems so overwhelming, but I can promise you in the years that I did that, it paid off tenfold. So by now, I think you might be pumped up to start standardizing everything. But before jumping down that rabbit hole, you know, take some time to plan your processes. So first, you know, make a decision on how and who is going to own the process. You know, for example, payment plan approvals. You know, the process would be the owner submits, the manager gets approval, then the manager submits to collections or the accounting department for setup, but then also make sure that there are internal processes for how you're going to follow up on payments, you know, notice of non-payment and next steps. So that segues into our discussion about creating a checklist of how you handle these steps. And then lastly, you know, you do have to do periodic review to see if these processes are working or if they need updated. Again, make use of the checklist and then review and update. Now we're going to talk about what I like to call the 360 view. So we're starting way up high and looking down. So it's important to meet with the key team players to determine and develop what I call portfolio standards. So a way of doing things that doesn't take into account individual community needs. So in order to be efficient, we're going to have a standardized GL structure. We're going to whatever that next step is. And then really get feedback and empower your team to help you build and manage these processes. I mean, they're the ones on the front line every day, so they're probably gonna have the best ideas about how to make these processes easier and better and faster. And then input these across all your communities, and then you can review and add variances on an as-needed community level. That way, it's almost always the same, but you may have a small variance. But then remember, for every variance you make, you know, there's that chance for error. Especially when you're doing a lot of same way every time, but oh, I have to remember for ABC community, it's done just a little different. So that always kind of slows down the process. So try to avoid that as much as you can. Okay, now we're going to go through a quick synopsis of a wrap-up. So, and also on anyone that, you know, is questioning some of these things we're talking about today, I've got samples, I've got templates, I've got forms, and I'm happy to help and provide those things to you. So I'll give you my contact information at the end of this. So one thing I think is so crucial in this industry is that so many people get so complacent and don't want to change. And no, I'm not talking to you accounting people. No, seriously. You know, adapting and staying ahead is so difficult. And unfortunately, ain't nothing changed but the change. So Owners are so busy trying to keep up, and, it's hard to really analyze if what you're doing is worthwhile. And the most successful business owners have these key strengths that set them apart and contribute to their overwhelming success. And one is they're very forward thinking. They're not looking about what's just going on now. They're thinking a year out, 2 years out. What are going to be the expectations? How is technology changing what those are? How do we communicate with our owners? They're always thinking on the next steps. And that's not always easy because, change comes with its set of, challenges. And taking risks, most people very uncomfortable with it, but it's so essential in keeping you ahead of that curve. You can't be afraid to take risks. It's essential in gaining an edge in our industry. You think about when was the last time you analyzed not only your processes, but also the systems you're using to get those done. So technology advancements are making it easier and faster to provide services with a lot less overhead and headaches. And a lot of executives don't realize the true cost of how much their systems are preventing them from streamlining and really, increasing their efficiencies. But that's okay, because in our September webinar, we're going to be covering that. So look out for that invite, everyone. And I want to thank you all for taking the time out today. That's what sets you apart and makes you more successful. And I'm happy to answer questions or provide any additional information. And you can take down my email address here, and I'm happy to assist you all. Again, thank you for attending, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.